cats and boots and cats and boots and cats and boots and cats. Here we go. Think back to 2014. Remember, or if you're not a FromSoft fan, imagine what it was like to see this trailer and then these words pop onto screen. Dark Souls was a fantasy series about knights and wizards where you had a massive array of weapons to choose from and a suite of creative fantasy creatures to test your shiny new polearm on. And now, you are a Victorian-era hunter with a gun, not even half the weapons, and your opponents are werewolves and humans. You're no longer in a fantasy world, you're in a Lovecraftian one. How does a jump that big work? And how does something so new live up to Dark Souls? You can't possibly make a game as good as Dark Souls. You're right, they didn't. They made a better one. Bloodborne needs no introduction, but buried deep in this masterpiece is a design choice that I want to talk about. Because it's weird and experimental and arguably was a total flop. It probably makes the game worse, to be honest. I'm talking about the Chalice Dungeons. Now, on paper, Bloodborne looks like a massive departure from Dark Souls. Change of eras, consoles, even they changed the role. There's way less weapons, a new gun parry, no shields, basically no magic, no dual wielding or boss weapons or humanity or Estus flasks. So much was changed. So much was removed. But if you play Bloodborne after playing any of From's other titles, you'll notice really quickly that nope, this is still a FromSoftware game. From really did change so much in Bloodborne, but they did it by evolving an already settled core foundation. Instead of reinventing the wheel, they redesigned the car. The engine was updated, the seats got a new feature, they can go backwards now. There's a cup holder now. That's cool. But the wheels supporting it, those stay on at all times. That's how From does it. It's how they're able to create such huge worlds over and over. They don't throw away what works, they just redesign it. Bloodborne was made so carefully. If you tally the features it adds to combat that are completely original, you end up with a count of 4. The rally mechanic, trick weapons, guns, sorta, and breaking limbs. Quick stepping is just a dodge, but faster. The gun parry works exactly like a shield parry, but it's a projectile. Charged backstabs just made it a stagger on connection instead of an instant animation on hit. Also, it's R2 instead of R1. And those are pretty much all the changes. Bloodborne does more removing than adding. So many weapons and systems were removed to create a more focused experience, which is brilliant. It makes Bloodborne feel so unique. And the new mechanics all work together flawlessly. Riposting enemies when they stagger maxes out your HP get back when it's in the rally state. You can perform the more demanding backstab since quick steps get you behind the enemy so quickly. You can lose HP to get more bullets and then hit enemies and get your HP through a rally. That also might be a 5th mechanic, but shh. This game is so awesome. And that's not even talking about some of the other fun new features like gems and carol rooms. The combat changes were made with a lot of thought and care, and very obviously, a lot of playtesting. So here's the big question. What the fuck happened with the Chalice Dungeons? They don't feel like they got even a 10th of the polish that the other changes did. They feel like a fan mod. Brother, if anyone plays for even half an hour, doesn't matter who, if it's you, your friend, his brother, their brother, the barber's grandmother, any one of them can tell you that this is ass. The Chalice Dungeons just don't work. Nobody likes these stupid dungeons. These people don't exist. They are only fun because Bloodborne is fun. There are brief moments of cool things, and the unique bosses are alright. Although they do kind of feel like the place that FromSoft put their ugly children. You know what I mean? Like, these bosses have weird quirks, so instead of fixing them, From just went, we'll just hide them in the basement, nobody will see. And I mean, they were right. Bloodborne is my favorite game, and it still took me until last week to see all the bosses, because no way I was going to play every Chalice Dungeon for fun. What I do for content, man. So why do I like them so much exactly? Because From knew. They knew this was the riskiest concept. They knew this was a feature that was most likely to fail, so they didn't focus on it. They made it totally optional and put it in a place where it could be unfinished but still work. I mean, it is unfinished. Literally in the printed strategy guide for the game, there's a section about a boss rush Chalice dungeon that just didn't make it in. Right to the end of the game's production, they were cutting things from the Chalice dungeons. Instead of betting the farm, they built a solid foundation on things they knew worked, or were likely to work. And then the totally new thing, they made optional. I'm sure if people had loved it, they would have focused on it in the future game. But they didn't, so they moved on and worked on other forms of experimentation. This is how FromSoft succeeds. They experiment and try new things, but they do it on top of a tried and true foundation. And they don't just experiment with their games. Dark Souls 2, the sequel to From's most successful game at the time, was directed by not Miyazaki. Yui Tanimura was one of Dark Souls 2's directors and the director of its DLC. He was a part of a number of From's other games, but he had no involvement with Demon or Dark Souls. But he did such a good job on 2 that he returned to co-direct alongside Miyazaki on Dark Souls 3, Elden Ring, and Shadow of the Erdtree. From's most popular franchise was the one they handed off to new talent to give them a chance to succeed. A trend they've continued with Night Rain. But while Yui was saving DS2 from disaster, Miyazaki was developing the next evolution of the franchise, the one backed by Sony, meant to be a new console system seller. They weren't putting all their eggs in one basket, but they were taking a risk and trying something new. And personally, I would say it paid off.